Hello, yo.
We can say afternoon, sure. Good morning.
It's kind of
Good morning. It is always
Good
morning.
Just say
to
good
some
morning.
people.
It's
Good
never not morning.
Hi,
Morning
I'm
somewhere.
King Dedede wearing a Christmas hat.
Honestly,
Oh.
I'm surprised about it.
The metamorphosis is complete.
Yeah. So this is less of an interview, less of a like standard episode, and more of just let's talk about OWC map pooling. On the document we made, there's a bunch of topics to talk about. Aaron, what do we want to start with? Like historic OWC pooling, process for originals, because there's a lot that we can talk about, but I think probably historic OWC pulling trends is the quickest thing to get out of the way, and then kind of just move down the list.
Yeah, I think start at the top because that gives us kind of a baseline for people who aren't maybe as familiar with kind of where OWC has come from in kind of how it's made its way through the years in terms of pooling.
So let's start with historic OWC pooling trends then. Which of you wants to talk about this? Maybe Dada or Azer. It feels like you two have been on the pooling team the longest at this point. But there's quite a lot of history with it. Difficulty has gone way up. Types of maps picked has gone way up. It's evolved with how pooling in general has evolved through the years. There's been the rise of customs and originals in the last in the 2020s. So there's a lot of small things that have added up to make the pools very, very different from what they used to look like.
Probably Dada start on this one since he was there way before me.
I can basically like start from roughly 2015, but like OWC pooling used to be like the Wild West, basically. In 2011, 2012, 2013, you had like a lot of no mods, like very little hiddens. Like people would just pick maps that were like hard enough that existed. There used to be actually some customs, which was a little funny, but like they were very like rough customs. Very much like the type of map you would find back in the day. And then like 2014, 2015, it kind of got a little bit more organized. Balancing was still a little bit all over the place. Obviously, if you look at those pools, it used to be like way, way less difficult than they are nowadays. Like a grand finals pool for 2015, like the classic Furioso Melodia, like tiebreaker, like epic. This would be like a round of 16 pool nowadays, difficulty wise. And then like 2016, 2017, like was the end of like the mappers as poolers, because back in the day you used to have like the head of pooling used to be like one famous mapper or two famous mappers, and then like Loctav would supervise the process.
Rank max only too.
Yeah. Basically, you have some questionable decisions. You had like some maps that were very funny in hindsight. Like you had back in the day, you had like failed scores not counting, and you had maps that you could very easily fail at the end, like Dopamine, like
Night of Nights.
Night of Nights, yeah. Stuff that in 2016, 2017 actually altered the course of matches. And you had just random decisions happening, like maps would get replaced by other maps without people knowing. And then 2018 was kind of like my first year, Forza's first year as well, I think, or like second year at that point. But basically, that's kind of like when slot bowling got introduced to OWC. We kind of started like rough slot bowling at that point, and in 2019, 2020, Force took over, and he started doing way, way, way more customs. Customs were first introduced around then. When Force started doing customs, he also started introducing like dedicated rhythm slots, dedicated like stamina slots and stuff like that over like the original like setup of slot bowling that we had. And then 2021 happens. They have a falling out with the whole payment like debacle, and they basically all of the pulling team in 2021 leaves, and then 2022 basically Azer, which was the only one remaining, and me
Mordred.
and Tayo and Mordred as well. We kind of are left to kind of pick up the scraps and go back to something that could resemble something cool, and then we decided to like start shifting away from slot pulling, but it was like a rough process to start. And then 2023 Chiv comes in, I believe, for actual selection, and then we start actually doing that in 2024. We basically, I think we did a pretty good job of doing that. 2024 was really the year where we actually like did it from start to finish pretty well.
I can say in 2021 too, when pretty much the majority of the team just left. It was pretty hard to rebuild everything essentially from scratch. I think until this year we were still trying to kind of replace those pieces. It was definitely a rough first year being put in. At least for me, like it was my first year. I guess like taking charge as a pooler. It was pretty rough to get everything in place and finding all the right people and stuff. So I think ever since then we've been trying to just focus on a few people that do the best possible job, and ever since then we've been kind of building around that, right? Like since 23 it hasn't really changed. We kind of figured out what we wanted to do, right? Mostly just us three, being centered around us three, and having pretty split roles and kind of having our own people that we want to bring in and stuff. And I think it's been nice. We've been able to like refine the experience and like the infrastructure to allow each other to like focus on the areas that we do best. And I think that's really valuable.
Yeah, for sure. I kind of just don't have much to add because obviously I joined the team at the latest, but it's definitely completely traversed like previous eras of map pooling, and OWC tends to be not only the stand front for map pooling in general, but also needs to reflect on how map pooling is carried out over the years, and especially during 2022, 2023, people were starting to get really bored of slot pooling, and then OWC had to make a statement as well, keeping up with the rest of the tournament gameplay.
We had to spice things up. I think the 22 was the first time we were like, full slot pooling is not it. Man. It's not interesting. let's just make it interesting. I'm sure both of you, probably everyone here actually can probably have a lot of experiences where you find a really good map that you'd want to put in a tournament, and then can't like fit it anywhere because it does too much or doesn't really fit in a slot pool and whatnot. So like it was a problem that had to be fixed.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not gone entirely, but I think we've kind of. It wasn't even explicitly discussed or anything. It was just like a lot of the areas that are usually problematic or are usually very set in stone. Now aren't. So it's kind of nice to just not have like that restriction of like, yeah, this map needs this and that. So it's kind of cool. I guess in 22 we also did that free mod change, which I guess is like a small thing, like just putting one of the no mods down to free mod, because also that's just more interesting in my opinion. So, but I think for how the pooling like history is went and stuff, I think it's pretty good. We're in a really good spot right now. I think it's allowed us to use a lot of maps and make a lot of new projects and stuff that normally wouldn't really have a spot if we didn't do those evolutions, right? Like there's a lot of maps that like off the top of my head, like Good Child and Fox Spirit in Run of 32 would not really have worked because it does a little too much. Resolution would probably not have worked because it's a really weird map to have in early stages and stuff, like crazy stuff like the Big Black like could never happen. Warcry could never happen, right? Valdez, Rubik's Cube. There's a lot of like really interesting maps that are just like, hey, this is just a map. It does questionable things. Enjoy, So I think it's nice that we were able to put those in now.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So I think that ties in well to what we wanted to talk about next, which was 2024's pooling philosophy, especially with regard to skill sets and like difficulty scaling throughout the pools. That difficulty scaling was a hot topic, but I'm actually more interested in like skill set expression through the pools. Maps like Valdez, for example, I think were maps that to a lot of, at least to me, felt like kind of the one thing that did that thing throughout the entire tournament. Like the only map that did that, tested that skill set or tested that combination of skill sets throughout the tournament. So how do you work to fit those kinds of maps in when there isn't really an analog? And what do you like, how does that impact pooling for the teams so that there's either predictability or unpredictability in strategy from round to round, right? Some teams are going to be really, really good at a map like Valdez, right? CS6, swing, rhythm control, reading. And some teams are going to be really bad, even if they're good at some adjacent things like normal alt maps or other reading skill sets or just general finger control. Some players just don't have the swing in them, and especially not with that combination. So how do you try to balance for the overall like skill set balance throughout the pool when there's not really solid analogs for some of these more unique maps that go in?
Let's go first.
Yeah, I can start real quick. Just I think you have a lot to both of you should probably have a lot to say about this, but I think in general, I think for a map of that type, uh, this might be a little bit of a special case with Valdez because it was an original, so it had a lot of extra planning. But
Right.
usually when, what's another map? Let's use Rubik's Cube as an example, because Rubik's Cube was done extremely early. It's a map that doesn't really fit anywhere. It's just interesting, and it's fun to play. So we have that map early before any of the pool is built, really. And so I think when you have those maps, those really iconic, like out there maps, we tend to kind of just slot them in first and try to just build the rest around them, right? So I think this is mostly your two. Both of you have been doing a lot more work than I have for that because you two are much more aligned with like skill set balance and stuff. So you should probably talk about that if you want.
Chip can go first.
Yeah, so there's a couple things for sure. Firstly, I want to talk about the concept you just mentioned about I call them focal points of a pool or basically basis picks. So basically you have some special maps that do some crazy things and you want to build the pool around it. For instance, Rubik's Cube has a lot of skill sets, and it was also one of the first custom maps we had for grand finals, if not the first actually. So we were able to make it work by, imagining what we want around it. It's kind of an alt flow pick with a bunch of overlap reading. So we figured that it was pretty gimmicky on the side, and that's why you see the free mod picks actually. Free mod 1, free mod 4 both being pretty mechanic heavy. And also no mod 3, the other alt map in the pool, not feeling anything like Rubik's Cube. So that's a big thing. And the second one is with regards to skill set balancing, slot pooling kind of paved the way in terms of how skill sets are naturally represented in pools. So you have a certain amount of aim picks, a certain amount of speed, a certain amount of flow, and then you kind of get into more like the nitty gritty and science type of things. But in essence, it's only one arrangement of how these skill sets can be made. And when you take it apart, you can just, kind of move the skill sets around, explore with different maps, kind of start hyper analyzing what each map actually does. And when you start doing that, balancing feels more fluid and it really enables you to kind of achieve like a new level of pooling for sure.
Yeah. You talked about the part where we fit a pool around a certain map or a couple of certain maps. There's also the opposite case where we end up pooling in a way that makes us need a very specific map or a map that does like things that normally are like not really seen together. So like for example, stuff like Big Black in quarterfinals. Like or even like Lag Train. Lag Train is actually the better example because Lag Train was basically the last map we pulled. Lag Train, we needed a map. We felt that the pool without a map, so without that slot, was already pretty much balanced well. So we needed a map that did either equal parts, like a lot of things, or essentially like nothing specific. So we pulled a map that did that, and it ended up not getting picked, but like it was a map that a lot of teams could have picked in like a 50-50 sort of fashion, which basically means that like any team can have a potential advantage if they run out of picks. So like they have a pick that's 50-50, it's like better for them, at least in a statistics sort of sense. So like while slot pulling is like the like consistent, like you're getting this exact skill set distribution over an extended period of time. I think that what we're doing right now is we're basically like slowly changing convention over every single like pull to where like players should not be able to know exactly what they're going to get every single time, but it should still be balanced in a way that they should expect balance, but not the exact types of maps that they get in every single slot pool, for example.
Would you say that's something that, like, on the whole has made pooling easier or harder, or kind of no net change?
Definitely harder, I think.
It's definitely harder, yeah, for sure. Like
It's
back in
harder.
2020, 2021, you literally could go to any custom community tournament and you would see the same exact maps being used because that was just the meta. You would have your Skyflame number 1, you'd have your Knowledge King number 2, you would have your Morph number 3, and you would just go down the list. And I made map pooling really simple, which is why a lot of map poolers that kind of started breaching those norms, specifically Kanyo, Nick, and Dio as well. Actually, these are three I actually recite pretty often. Especially these guys are kind of the storefront of people who started really exploring different skill set and skill slot narratives. And then obviously Dada was there as well, but he didn't really do that much community pooling. It was mainly like USC and other stuff. But afterwards, you start to see in 2022 to 2023, you start to see people like Megamic really start taking care of it. And other people like Maxi later on. So I think it's really definitely going to make things like harder at a like from a like a regular pooling standpoint, but the ability to achieve a great pool is actually a little easier now because you have so much more freedom.
Basically, like you have a factory line, which is slot pulling. Like you are making the same exact Model T car over and over again. And meanwhile, in what kind of is we kind of like did freeform pulling nowadays. That is more like we can always start from somewhere. That somewhere can be completely different, but we're trying to end up at like a car at the end of the day, just with the Model T comparison. So like basically the biggest challenge in our way of pulling right now is balancing things difficulty wise, because for the slot pulling you had like you relied basically on like the mechanic slot, it's like the aim slots and stuff to balance the pool around it, and then like obviously you'd have some trouble balancing the non-mechanic slots, but like things were pretty set in stone. Nowadays we have to like take into account a lot of more complex difficulty elements, which obviously like you have some outliers still even at the end of the process, even for a lot of test players, a lot of like uh people who are actually going through the pool and like thinking, oh, this can be like a little bit too hard, a little bit too easy. But I think that sort of difficulty balancing, it's the variance is a little bit higher in our style of pulling, but the the payoff is also like a little bit cooler, I think, as well.
It's a lot more like artistic and creative, I would say. I think it allows you to just think of random stuff and be able to execute it in a way that still works for everyone that like interacts with the pool, I think. And I think compared to slot pooling, I don't think you ever have those opportunities really. It's a lot more like streamlined.
Yeah.
It's like you're gonna make something that is super hyper balanced, and it's not gonna be interesting really, no matter what you put in there. Like there's no expectations to play with, or like you'll never go like, oh, you see like that they pulled that map, like no, that would never happen. So, in fact, that never happened. So
I think one of the ways that I've thought about it recently, sorry to interrupt, Aaron, but one of the ways that I've thought about it recently is slot pooling is really, really good for poolers who are new or not super experienced at pooling yet, because it allows them to have kind of a formula for what makes a balanced pool, right? Because at the end of the day, slot pooling came about because people wanted pools that were balanced for a number of different skill sets. And it did that job, but it also made it so that everyone was doing that same exact combination of skill sets every week in every tournament. And so breaking away from having everybody do the exact same balance of skill sets every week, or exact same set of skill sets every week in non-slot pooling or looser slot pooling nowadays, I think works really well, because the slot pooling is dead thing is also just, we want to change how skill sets are represented throughout the pool, where they are, what kinds of maps there are, while still keeping overall the same balance, right? So it I think works pretty well at maintaining the same types of stuff that you're going to see in a pool, but also making the individual maps very different. Which for new poolers or people who don't know how to evaluate what skill set a map tests very well yet, that is very, very hard. So slot pooling is really, really good for newer poolers because of that.
Yeah, slot pooling is like a recipe. So basically, you're making bread, and it's a very good recipe at making bread. But if you eat bread over and over again, you're bored. Like nobody's gonna eat stale bread, or normal, like white bread over and over and over again, and not be bored of eating white bread. It's born out of necessity, and like it's very good at what it does, but you have to like spice it up as well.
Also a little on topic, maybe kind of a deviation to mention is that just how I use the bread analogy, it's really good at making bread, but as people get served bread over and over again, people's like expectations of bread become even higher. Like, oh, this bread isn't nearly as the level of this one. So just like I was stop pulling, the reason why we partially killed is also in a couple years, pools would have been so custom reliant because the definition of each slot would have been like almost like micromanaged at some point, you know, like to the last detail. Every map would have been custom, and a lot of existing maps, especially like earlier maps, wouldn't be able to survive because they just don't fit any pooling definition at this point, no matter what. So it's really important that people can be more open-minded about things, both poolers, players, casters, viewers alike, and it definitely keeps things more fresh and, you know, pushes this, you know, the overall game into a more flexible position rather than what would have been in a couple years the other way around.
I want to add a small thing to that before probably Aaron gets to say it, whatever you were trying to say like 3 minutes ago.
My bad, bro.
But but
nothing super important.
Okay, well, I think with regards to slot pooling too, there are some of the maps that are still expected to be in pools today don't exist anymore. They're not really made, and the only ones you ever find are other tourney customs that make them because the slot says it should exist. You know, things like anti-mod, for example, or sure, let's just use anti-mod. Like, not really a lot of anti-mod maps being made in the modern era of the game. Like, I think all of them that are like valid for this kind of slots are like expired or have been used like 17 times a month, right? So I think having the flexibility to move around some stuff. I think one of the things we did was like, I guess in slot pulling, like the Nomad 2, like the stream flow aim stuff. Like also a slot that's pretty limited in availability of existing maps. Well, it's kind of not there anymore. That's the solution we found. Like, we just put those skill sets elsewhere. Those players are still satisfied, we hope, but you know, we don't really have to go through the headache of like pulling the same maps over and over again. If we find one, it'll go there. If someone wants to make one, it'll go there. But at least we don't need, you know, me and Dada to map Nomad 2s and anti-mods because no one wanted to, right? So
what do you mean?
I don't know if that's
keep pulling Blue Zenith 4 dimensions year over year in the same round in OWC? Come on, man. Like,
well, yeah, I don't know. I think this is a bit boring too, but it's more so the problem that comes from that is like, well, okay, all the maps are exhausted. So now we have to custom every single one of them. And so now we just have the same custom every time, trying to model new maps around maps that don't exist anymore. What's the point? Why are we testing people on this, you know? So.
Yeah, I completely agree. You used an example. Yeah, both of you guys made an anti-mod map this year. Anti is both of you guys made a stream map.
Yeah. And you gotta get your map archetype somewhere. I think it's interesting, and I don't want to be like stuck on the same topic forever, but going away from kind of the traditional slot pooling is interesting because you had this issue where people complained about either maps getting overused or like skill archetypes getting overused, right? Where it's like Chip said, like the Skyflame Nomad 1 and the Knowledge King Nomad 2, they were just like the same thing over and over. And we got all these complaints about like overuse this, overuse that. And then going away from slot pooling, introduce the ability to use or reuse classic maps for like a hype factor, and so they don't get complained about being like overused, right? So you bring in Blue Zenith, to use Dio's example, or you bring in Freedom Dive, or you bring in Big Black, Hold Your Color, Fallen Angel. How much of going away from traditional slot pooling that had gotten so crystallized was aimed at being able to bring back some classic maps in places that you maybe wouldn't have been able to use them before. Because it seems like that's been much more increased in the last couple of years, are these like certain kind of intentionally hype picks that we really didn't see for a while in the height of slot pooling era.
I think that's a really good transition into the next thing we wanted to talk about, I think, which is like just general pooling philosophy this year.
I thought we were talking about that already.
I thought we were talking about pooling philosophy this year.
We're
To be
on
fair.
that point, but Ace made it like clear now. Like I think we're on that point.
Yeah, I just want to mention, I've mentioned this a couple times lately because I've been thinking about this a lot. At least personally, I think it's important to remind people that OWC is not necessarily for one audience or one type of person. It's a gigantic community event, the biggest community event that everyone looks forward to, that has representation for the game and all of its communities. And so I think it's really important to remember that some of the content that's here and played and presented is for those communities. And you know, there's a lot of them. To me, I think there are 4 that really stand out that I think you could separate pretty well. Where obviously, like, first one being the players themselves. The players are going to want certain things. They're going to want balance. They're going to want certain map types. They're going to want to be able to show off, you know, what they can do and stuff. There's also the entire mapper group where, you know, mapping in OWC is aspirational now. Like, people have this as a real goal, and I think they put a lot of time and effort, and they want to be able to show off like what they want to do. So a lot of those maps end up as unique as they are because we kind of let them. But there's also the viewers. There's like, what, 30,000, 40,000 people watching OWC year by year, right? Obviously, these people are going to want something with it too. They're going to want, you know, something recognizable and stuff. So it's important to have room as an intentional thing for them to have recognizable picks to not just, oh, like, I don't know these 20 customs, right? Like with slot pooling before, when it was a lot of customs all the time, is like, that was the number one complaint with OWC was, I don't know these maps. Everything's a custom. It's not exciting. I don't know shit. I don't play the tournament.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to satisfy all of those groups. With the 4th probably being with originals. A lot of people just want a lot of originals, but that's a point for later, I think. But yeah, it's something that at least I keep in mind for like literally every decision that we do regarding OWCs, that like these 4 groups of people like need to be represented in some way. So I think where those pools, those iconic maps come from is definitely a little bit of that. So
I think that's a good transition into one of the other things that we wanted to talk about in this episode, which is what is the right percent of custom maps, right? If there's a lot of difficulty, you know, if part of the reason for moving away from slot pooling was, oh, we don't need to have every map be custom. Okay, well, what is the right percent of custom maps, right? How many is too many? Is it too many for the viewers? Is it too many for players in some cases? How does that impact being able to balance the pool well? Because balancing customs is way harder than balancing normal picks, right? Yes, you have a little more control over the mapping process, but you also either have to bin it or kind of pool the rest of it around it. Whereas with a normal pick, non-custom, you can just toss it and slot something else in. So what's the right amount, or is there a right amount? Because I also don't know the answer to this question. I have my own opinions, but it's still something I try to, you know, experiment with from time to time and see how much is too much or too many customs or too few customs for large tournaments like this.
So basically, like, customs at the late stage of like slot pooling being an institution, like, so like 2021, customs used to be like so prevalent that none of them were really cool or like recognizable. You would just get guided by the slot that they were in. So like spectators would see a Nomachi that they'd never heard of, and it was a custom, and then all they know is, oh, it's a floating stream map, right? They would like look at it and like see it played, and then it would be like some random id map, and nobody would like really
That nobody has ever played again.
like that would just be inconsequential. I think a lot of the aim that we need to have for the percentage of customs and like actually bringing in customs that aren't just like, this is the map, this is what you will map, and we will have that exact same recipe with no deviations, and then people will forget about your custom in a week. Instead of that, we need to actually make custom cool again, and by doing that, we reduce a little bit of the percentage of customs, like at least compared to like what we had back then, and then give them freedom, give them fire, like give them actually like something that they can control and they can map and give them actual agency. So to make customs cool again, not only for the mappers but also for the players, also for the spectators, and through that we can actually like reduce the percentage of customs, but make them mean something. So uh, I think that proportion is like 50-50 or like 60-40 or 40-60. Like it can change, it can oscillate, but I think the main aim of reducing the amount of customs and like actually getting customs to be more free flow is exactly that, to make like customs cool for everyone involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I can go next quickly. So a couple things I wanted to say was that um this definitely, it's really hard to give like an exact percentage. Honestly, we would just say like, oh, 50-50 or 60-40. But the truth is like it really depends on the star rating and the stage. So you'll see, especially in OWC this year, early stage actually is probably like, I think it was like maybe like 40 custom or 30 custom to 60, 65 original maps. And then when you get to finals, grand finals, it's pretty much, I want to say like 80 custom, and you have like maybe 4 or 5 maps that are non-custom. That's pretty intended because, you can find a lot of cool and usable old maps, but a lot of maps just don't really meet the difficulty scale that OWC asks for now. So especially in grand finals, finding good no mod and hidden maps is an extremely difficult task, and it does come to a point where getting customs is going to be generally easier for the map pulling process. And the second thing is also, I think when it comes to custom mapping, they kind of have different purposes. So the way we adapted the process, I kind of mentioned this in multiple meetings we did, but we have this wave process where we take mappers in differently. So the first time we take in mappers is if they are especially creative and they do a lot of different types of maps, and we really want to just give them a platform to see what they create. Some examples of mappers we can talk about are Helia, who made Rubik's Cube this year, Dallas and Mirage, who have made multiple different maps over the years, completely just creating different skill sets. Although Melon Boy, has been making aim maps. Every time he makes one, it's completely different. So, these types of mappers who are super flexible. And on the second half, you have mappers who usually come in, to map their niche, map something that they're really comfortable with, are usually inducted later into the process. So we have, this year we had Jellium come in, who made a Nomad Stamina map, and we had Vito come in to make a Nomad Reading Gimmick map. And, different custom mappers can be utilized in different ways and have them represented in different methods as well, which is really important. And yeah, I think both ways are super balanced, and it's really just up to the map pullers themselves to really be able to incorporate a good balance between everything involved.
Yeah, I always hate this question because I don't think it's something that we really keep in mind too much. Like the percentage, I would say, like it never really like reaches a tipping point on either side that it like needs to be a question that is asked. I feel
Not per pool, at least.
yeah. That's the thing too. I think a lot of the just to rephrase, I think a little bit of what Dada said. I think a lot of it is just about reducing filler. Every map or as many maps as possible should be memorable in some way or should be interesting in some way. And I think if you force yourself to adhere to like, oh yeah, this we're doing 50% customs and 50% existing maps, and it's like you're gonna have some slop in there, right? Like that's not really conductive to a good experience. I think just naturally with the way we handle things right now, the balance ends up in like that 40-60 range overall. But I think it's very pool dependent, and it's very much dependent on maybe like the mappers that we have for any given round. Some of them are going to be super creative, and then some of them are just kind of do their job. And I think it's hard to pinpoint like a specific number. So I never know how to answer that question. It's like I don't know. We don't really target anything. So
I feel like the point of like making customs mean something is kind of the important part there, though, is we want maps that are going to be good in their own right. And I kind of like, I feel like we talked about this at the beginning with Dada's point on this, where a lot of customs are it's just like planned obsolescence, right? Like they're going to be used for one round and then they disappear into the ether. But then, especially nowadays, there's a lot more super cool customs that I think deserve to like have some form of recognition. And like the tiebreakers are one thing because those can get ranked more easily because of not needing a spread. Has there been any discussion on like what to do with customs after they're done? Like traditionally, customs don't really get reused, right? You don't really see them getting repooled elsewhere too frequently. But like I feel like has there like what kind of recognition has there been discussion of giving them some sort of recognition, I guess, beyond just having OWC in their tag, to keep them alive for maps that are really cool and took effort and were shown on a big scale.
This is something that's very actively being discussed, I think. Very actively being worked on, or at least talked about what we should be doing about those. But it's important to consider that we make around, I think this year we had 70 custom maps or so. Actually, I'm excluding tiebreakers, I think. So 76 custom maps or 75. That's a lot of spreads to do if you want to rank that, like we are just straight up increasing the workload for everyone involved and need to find more people 5 times over, if not more, for all the spreads, right? So, it's not something that's super realistic, I think, to do. I think it takes a lot of our time and effort that we dedicate to making a lot of the interesting parts of OWC to just making easy diffs and normal diffs and stuff. It's just like, maybe not. But it is a part of the conversation that's not really up to us about doing something with ranking these maps. Obviously, if they're original, that's different. But just like a regular custom map or something. Honestly, really hard to do anything about that. And I think a lot of the solutions that people give to that is just like, well, these are OWC maps. They should just be ranked automatically without spreads, or we should make new rules that do that and stuff. At the end of the day, I don't think we should get any preferential treatment or anything with these, right? Like, we're all just regular. This is just a community tournament that's officially endorsed, and there's no reason for us to have preferential treatment when it comes to customs and being able to rank them with loose spreads and all that. So it's not an easy problem to solve, but it is a problem that I think we think of lately a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe Kevin, if you want to go first, and then we'll, I think, move into one other thing here.
Just a quick tip. I'm kind of on the opposite side of Israel. I've already explained a lot, like especially coming from a person who's not well versed in the mapping scene at all, so not even interested in anything of like BNs or like NAT. I did mention that I think that spread rules should be probably adjusted for OWC maps, because I do think that it represents the game in some form of way, and it's a big reward to mappers who do decide to contribute to tournament mapping, which is something that helps keep the tournament scene alive. So I've been in very big support, especially for OSA originals, that spread rules should be more lenient. Especially like, for instance, there's 2 maps that are not 4 minutes and not 5 minutes in length that are both tiebreakers, and they both needed spreads. This being the Minstrel map and the IME map, which actually did get a spread. And I feel like I just don't see the necessity, I guess, for playing these lower diffs. I feel like I do understand there's an audience that does care about the song itself, but I feel like most people generally care about just playing the diff they see in OWC. So I think it's definitely going to be needing more discussion. And I know, yeah, people are talking about spread rules a lot, me included. So hopefully they get more representation. I do know T1G did talk about, maps being reused for tournaments. And I think there is kind of this negative stigma for some reason, which is like, if one map is pulled in a large tournament, other large tournaments cannot touch the map ever again. We tried to break it this year by pulling 2 Corsace maps, which are really good, Mazarin's Ainane and LMT Silvery. But I really think that this type of thing where it's like, it should be okay for OWC to use stuff like SSOT or Corsace customs, and Perennial can use Corsace customs as well. Corsace is full custom for the last 2 years, so I can't really use that as an example. But just keeping these things in mind, it makes things more positive. This kind of goes into a different entire point, which is why I really hate tournament like communities seeing themselves as competition. Like, I've never seen OWC as a competitor to Corsace or a competitor to Perennial. I've always seen it as, these tournaments should all be flourishing together to make the most positive tournament scene possible. So it directly ties into that as well with, kind of having maps being used frequently. So yeah, I think it's overall positive that maps can be reused more and more.
A slightly different segue now, but yeah, I think especially with originals, maps being used again in other places is really cool. And I feel like there should be more originals used in other places. So let's talk about the originals. How do those impact the pooling process, right? It's one thing, or let's just go over the process for originals first from start to finish. So Alex, if you want to talk about that a little bit, because there's a lot that goes into an original. I don't have full eyes on the OWC process, but just from the originals that I've done for Perennial, it's been there's much more that goes into them than first meets the eye.
Sure is. It's I mean, it was definitely it was refined a lot over time. If you look at some of the older originals that we did, I think namely 2022, where that caused a lot of problems, I think, for a lot of people because there's a lot of steps we did wrong. Obviously, the songs were nice, but either they weren't really suitable, or there wasn't enough variety in them, or they made these two guys tear their hair out trying to work where to place them. So I think there's a lot that goes into it. But I mean, from scratch, initially we basically scope out who we're interested in. We do a lot. This is mostly done with Mango Miser, who's extremely helpful with outreach and basically just has like the giant contact book and takes care of all the communications with these people for the most part.
Which is huge, by the way. That is a
yes,
really, really good thing to have. I've had other people do that for me also. It's an immense help.
Yeah, so we basically just have like a wish list. Like we just give like the Christmas list of like, can we get that guy? Like let's reach out. Let's see if he's available. Like Bill Wirtz. Is Bill Wirtz available next year? So we kind of just go through a process like that, and then based on the replies that we get for the higher profile people, I think mostly I make a plan of kind of who we want from those people and where we place them, and I think there's a right mix that gets a little complicated sometimes. I still haven't really figured this out. We're trying something new next year, which I can't really talk about, obviously, because it's next year. But
right,
the balance between the biggest names possible and also a lot of like promoting like indie people that are like super interested, because there's a lot of those people that are more than good enough to make content for OWC that a lot of people would enjoy. However,
for example,
I think
Round of 16 Hard Rock 2. Anyone?
yes. I can talk a lot about that one, but I'll for the sake of time, maybe later. But there's a big mix. There's like the big names, right? Like this year we had like Graham, we had Camellia and stuff. But there's also a lot of really indie people that no one's really ever heard of, and I love giving those people a platform. So I try to kind of map out and consider what we want, what different styles we want and stuff. Like Nagiha, XH, Future Witness, a lot of people that Lusumi maybe not have heard of them before, but we gave them a platform. They all unconditionally cooked, and it was awesome. And that's good. That's rewarding for me. That's what I like to have. However, there's limited space for those because I think a lot of people just want the big names, right? It's a lot easier to get excited over originals and want to tune in when, oh my god, it's Camellia. There's a strong mix of both. But moving on from that, there's a lot of vision that goes into it. I think this is super important to have, and I think most of the challenge is actually being able to like foresee before you even hear the song or know what they're able to make, what kind of song is it, what difficulty range it's going to be, who's mapping it, and what we're doing with this, like where it's going. It requires a lot of like knowledge and intuition that I think a lot of people don't have. So it's a little tricky. Sometimes it's a little easier. Some songs are a lot more general use. I guess Valdez, I'll use as an example, where Valdez is like, this song is just good. We could literally use this in any round in so many different styles of map and stuff. So like that's never going to cause a problem. We can, after we get the song later on and stuff, we can pivot and manage. However, there's some songs that are very one-dimensional, that are very clearly made for like a specific purpose. Corrupted Paywall, I guess.
5.
Yeah, Corrupted Paywall is 285 BPM, like mostly speed map. Like I can't use this in round of 16. This goes here and only here, right? That tends to cause problems. We can talk about those later, because there's probably a good example of them that happened this year that causes a giant headache. But after that, I mean, just having the vision, be able to communicate that to both the artist who does not speak in OSU terms and the Mappooling team, which does not speak in music terms, is really important. So I think that's where most of the challenge is. But after that's done and started and the song starts and stuff, for OWC specific, well, for all of the World Cups right now, I kind of assist the producers a lot with their vision and general like music theory or production side of things, just to shape it according to what that event might want. For example, Grand Finals tiebreaker this year, Operation Zenith Fall. There was an extra tone part of that song at the end, like around 5 minutes in or something, that I essentially requested to just be axed because it would not work in Osu. You cannot make that interesting. It's just going to be the big black, basically. So it might work in other contexts, but like I think having the vision and the foresight to do that is where a lot of the challenge is. After that, I think after we get the song, a lot of that gets passed down from me. Like all of this so far, I think is largely just me and Mango, and with some consultation from people. But I think after that, we kind of just hand it off to the rest of the pooling team, right? Like Chiv and Donna, like we'll decide the mappers and where it's going and stuff, and the design team will also do their own thing separately, which isn't really a pooling thing, but they'll also start working on that, doing that. So that's how the process kind of goes as a whole, I would say.
So you talked about a couple of like types of customs or types of originals, excuse me, that sometimes give you roadblocks. I know there's particular songs that can do that, but there's also things that other different challenges that come along with doing originals, right? Not being able to change rounds for originals, right? If there's a set release date for a song from the artist, it's not always possible to just change the round and release it a different time like you could with a normal custom or with just a normal pick. You already talked about some of like maybe the song isn't fit for OS, but how do you handle like after it's slotted in somewhere and you've set the week for release and all that? What happens when the mapper gives a different song interpretation than expected? I know that happened this year also. So let's talk about that a little bit, because there's unique challenges that come along with originals, right? When you are pooling. Yeah.
I mean, I think we're both speaking the same example here, but there's one that was just very clearly problematic for us this year.
Yeah.
Which was it was not at all due to the song. It was just different visions clashed, I guess. Which was Data Eraser Finals No Mod 4. I had the song in mind, I had the map in mind, we put the mappers on it, all was good. Map itself was okay. There was a bit of a problem with clashing vision with the mappers, but we fixed it, it was all fine. But the thing is, this was now very much solidified as being the tech map of Finals. And if you've noticed, the week before that, the No Mod 4 of that week, which was Void Crossing by Silica, was really hard. Really, really, really hard.
Just a little bit.
And it would have been so easy to just move it forward. We can put it in Finals. We can put it somewhere above that. It does, it's an easy decision to make. However, now it's not. We can't move the Data Eraser map. It's there. It's solidified. It's releasing on this date. This is all the deadlines that the 30 people working on that map have. So it's hard to move that around. So it can cause a lot of problems. It's something that I always take in consideration because I've experienced it and I've also seen it. Was it 20? I forgot if it was 22 or 23 where we had like 7 or 8 originals in grands.
Yeah, last year it was 23. It was 23.
It was 23.
Yeah.
That was extremely problematic. You will never see that again. As cool as it was, for the internal side of things, trying to handle that and balance it and stuff when you don't even have the songs for a long time, is too problematic, right? So I think Chiv and Dada can probably take over from that, but it's like it's a big pain if you have too many of those that like restrict, adaptation essentially. So it's rarely a problem with the songs themselves, but mostly just like I might have a vision for something and I'll communicate to the artist, and then the artist will do something according to that vision, and then it gets passed down to mappers, and now suddenly it's all different. Or there are other unrelated problems that would be solved by changing the original or whatever it is, and then we can't because it's here. So
The more originals there are in the pool, because they are planned before the pool is even like kind of formally like put in thought, the harder the puzzle of pooling becomes. So basically you have some pieces shaped very specifically that only would connect to other pieces shaped very specifically. And the more of those there are, the harder the balancing puzzle becomes in terms of skill sets. And sometimes the balancing puzzle becomes impossible. Sometimes even these pieces affect, like Alex said, the puzzles beforehand, right? So like the balancing beforehand, the balancing like after, like things comparatively just don't really like mesh. And sometimes it is a little bit infuriating. I'm not gonna lie. Like we had like 17, not 17. Obviously, that's a little bit of a exaggeration, but we had like a bunch of originals last year grand finals, and that really impacted the way that the pool was able to be like balanced. People would even like complain that we biased it, like it's biased towards a certain team or other. And the reality is, like a lot of those originals, if they went in earlier pools, those earlier pools would definitely be like unbalanced. So we just had to like continue rolling the boulder down the hill, and then eventually actually like do something about it. But like the problem with balancing originals is that basically that is an exponential kind of growth of difficulty balancing wise, to where the more originals you have, the actual like bigger headaches you will have as well. So it's actually a fun puzzle at points. So if you have like 2 or 3 originals that kind of do certain things that are very unique things, you can really like have a fun time trying to figure out what to pull around it. If you have 8, you're not gonna have a fun time. You're gonna have a very hard time actually figuring out what pieces go with what. So I think Chiv can also like speak to that in some ways.
I'm gonna be honest, like I have no idea what we're talking about. Like my friend just sent me like a coupon for like $20. I've been ordering food
Oh
like
my god.
at my PC.
This
Can I get, like,
guy,
a quick
Kevin, Kevin.
Yo,
Dude, you're
yo,
blasting
hold on.
another server about how you're getting
It's-
fat because you're
it's-
ordering
it's
skip the dishes, bro.
$20.
Lock
It's
in.
$20 off.
All right.
Order. Like, think
Doing?
about that.
Chip, how
Oh,
much have I ruined your life last year by putting 8 originals in grants?
It's pretty bad. It was pretty bad. Like
There we go. That's the topic. That's the
now
topic,
you just
bro.
ruined my mood
Expand.
because I just got my order in, so I was really happy. But yeah, no. As for this, I think like it definitely makes the whole process really annoying. I hope I don't repeat anything that somebody else has said because
You
I
will, but
definitely
it's
have not
okay.
been listening. But for me specifically, like moving around originals because I have like a pretty bad habit of like doing things last minute. So originals are something that kind of can't be moved around after a certain period in time because of the design team, usually having a specific schedule as well. So it definitely makes things. It's kind of like sometimes you just like. Sometimes you just gotta have like not no flame to the maps, but like sometimes you just need like to have like your vegetables in the plate. Like they're there and you have to walk around them every single time. And it just like it definitely makes the process a little hard, but it's definitely worth it. And map pooling was never meant to be an easy thing. I think a lot of map poolers they talk about, the way I see it is like map pooling is like a puzzle. And that's why people do it so much. It's like just like really fun to just kind of try your luck and try your logic and see if you can solve these puzzles. And these are just like they make the whole process even harder, which makes map pooling that much more fun.
I want to add a thing to that because you briefly said the vegetables in the plate and stuff. I think with originals and their maps, we are way stricter with enforcing our vision of them. to avoid that problem. Essentially, we've had it happen where we kind of just let normally for most customs, we for the most part just let the mapper do what they want to do and then just try to fix it or deal with it afterwards. Like we have a lot of cases where we wanted a specific thing and then the mapper did a variation of it and it was really interesting, really cool, and we just adapted from it. We know it's not possible to have that adaptation for originals, so for the most part it's like we kind of need this map to do this, this, and that, and so if it doesn't, it's a problem, or it can cause major problems later on. So there's a lot of these originals this year that we definitely like kind of put the foot down and be like, actually no, this needs to change entirely. It's a bit unfortunate that this has to happen, but I think the mappers that sign up to do originals also kind of understand this implicitly. I don't think it was ever something like that was said, but it just kind of makes sense. We kind of get these songs to have a very specific thing going for them. So if it deviates too much from that or it has potential to cause problems, I think we're pretty quick to act on. So yeah.
I think, Aaron, is there anything else you want to ask about originals? Because I think that's most of what I wanted to talk about with originals. Like, there's probably, I think, room to move on to some of the other things that are on here down near the bottom. Because in talking about originals and quote unquote right percent of custom maps, we've talked about, I think, most of everything here near the top.
Yeah.
I want to add one more thing real quick because it
Sure.
kind of ties into what we were talking earlier about ranking them and spreads and stuff.
Mhm.
This is also with regards to originals, only originals, not custom maps in general. But there's a pretty sizable community in the Mappers Guild of people that are contributing a lot to older originals and stuff, trying to get them ranked. A lot of people are contributing in that way, and I think one of the next steps for us to try to solve originals a little bit more and make them a little bit more like presentable and ready is definitely working with those mappers and BNs and stuff to try to push those maps out of the gate with like full spreads or at least partial spreads. We've already done this a little bit. Round of 32 TB playing with Truth, I believe, just got submitted with like 3 difficulties.
That's awesome.
Or I think it was literally the entire spread except for 1. Just because, again, there's a lot of people viewing the event and a lot of people that are invested and want to interact with this stuff, and not everybody's going to be able to play a grand finals original. So it is of some importance to us to at least have some lower difficulty so people can actually interact with that content. We've kind of seen that happen a little bit with we released 2 originals for LGA last year, which was a much smaller event, admittedly, and a lot less people were aware of it. And those maps have like 200 plays because the maps are like 8.5 stars. They're literally made for the top 3 players in the world at the time. They're not really playable by most people. None of us here. So, you know, I think those are great songs that basically just don't get presence because there's no playable version of them for most people. So I think finding a way for us to include spread mappers and stuff like that to try to get stuff ready when the originals are released, like the day of, is a solid next step for us to do with regards to originals. I think it would be really cool to just put them all out and just have them be like instant ranked or whatever with full spreads. So I'm gonna try and make that happen next year.
Very cool. All right, let's talk about a couple of other things for just like OWC pooling in general. I think there was already some discussion on this sort of stuff during the internal postmortem, but there's a lot that went right this year, I think, in terms of how the playtesting was handled. Some of the things that some of the like organizational changes surrounding playtesting this year were really good. We can talk about the OWC selection team and the power of friendship. I know that's something that we've actually talked about before in terms of like making the selection process not induce burnout and just feel more like fun than work. And then especially, I think very correct this year was the hit sounding team that OWC had. So a lot of that was stuff that went right. I want to know in your opinion, there was stuff that went wrong this year also, after we cover the stuff that went right? Because, like, let's talk about the good stuff first, right? This year went pretty well.
I really like the fact that we have hit sounds now. I know most people do not care about hit sounds, so we're not really trying to do anything super crazy with them.
But we do.
However, I'm just happy I don't have to hit sound like 13 maps every year anymore. This is actually the first time for me ever that OWC pooling didn't burn me out. I'm here, I'm active right now. We just worked like I just put in like 800 hours to this event, and I can do more. First time ever, because I didn't have to do a lot of the stuff that is super busy work and stuff that I really don't want to do, like hit sounding. So shout outs to Midori and Verm for carrying a lot of that torch, because we don't have the capacity to do that. So that was one of the good things. For the other stuff, I can let other people speak.
Basically, like, for playtesting, I think we kind of figured it out. At least, like, going forward from this year, I think we have a pretty decent grasp on playtesting as well. We had a couple of lengthy lobbies, which maybe were the biggest point of contention this year.
The crash out lobbies.
There was
Let's play
definitely
for
a
3
couple
hours.
crash out
Infamous
lobbies.
crash out lobbies.
There
The
were
lobbies
absolutely
weren't
a
really
couple
the crash out.
lobbies.
Honestly, the crash out was the stuff after the lobbies.
Yeah.
So, the selection team, barring a couple of little issues we had, which some of them were resolved, some of them weren't, but I think we're in a good place. I think we had obviously, I think the biggest obstacle in the selection team is just the way time zones work and how
Yep.
Europe
those time
and
zones.
like early Asia can be a little bit messy. And but the selection team, I think, has a pretty decent like way of working now. I think that's like really good, which is something that I think, at least going forward, is a right thing, like the thing that went right. Basically, let me just comment on the playtesting, the way we did playtesting this year, so that it's a little bit more clear to people outside of the process. We have people taking a look at maps individually, and we also have playtesting lobbies. And the playtesting lobbies, we basically give people a time slot, and then we go over a whole pool together. And those lobbies can get pretty long because people want to give their thoughts on maps, and people want to replay certain maps, not play certain ones. People want to play options of maps, so like maps we have 2 different options. People want to play both, and those can get a little bit lengthy. But I think in general, the playtesting went pretty well this year. I think we had a lot of valuable playtesters really show up as well, and yeah, I'm really thankful for the hit sounding teams and like fiery as well, because of the timing and stuff like that, where like beforehand we would have to just either do hit sounding. Basically, Alex would do a lot of hit sounding just on his own because mappers didn't want to like do the hit sounds themselves, or timing. Me and Alex would have to do timing for certain maps, and it was really annoying as well, especially if people just wanted to map like a jazz song or like a live performance, and it was messy as hell. But for things that went wrong this year, I think one of the main things that went wrong was kind of lack of clarity for difficulty scaling, perhaps. Because I think the difficulty scaling of this year it took a lot of people by surprise. People didn't expect the grand finals poll to essentially have like 2 9-star maps, right? Obviously, star rating is in a transient state right now, and it's very unclear. Some maps are extremely overstarred. Some maps are very, very understarred, but that's always been the case. But basically, the upper limit of maps has that issue like multiplied by however much. Like, maps look scary because their stats look scary a lot of the time, but I think we failed in giving people a heads up on that a little bit, to where a lot of the most common complaints about finals and grand finals were, why is this shit 9 stars, 8 stars. Like it's so hard. Why is it so hard? Like we're getting 300k and then in Smash they get like FCs and stuff. Like players are crazy now. I think if we had given them a little bit of a heads up, they could have planned around it maybe. But honestly, we didn't really know. Like a lot of the polls this year were way easier when we conceptualized them, and then because of playtesting, because of like how some of the customs turned out or how some of the originals turned out, you had to give the polls like a little bit of gas in terms of difficulty, and that really affected the scaling a little bit. So yeah, that's the one thing I would say that went wrong this year.
Riot saying it's too easy at every map in every playtesting lobby.
For sure.
Yep,
That was a
it's
good
too
time.
easy.
It's too easy. It's
Yeah.
too easy.
Well, that's a problem that I feel like Dota specifically. I guess you've had to deal with like difficulty scaling in a similar setting in USC where the top teams are just way better than everybody else, quite frankly. So like the difficulty scaling, I feel like that's just like an additional challenge because I suppose ideally you want to have somewhat linear difficulty scaling, but when you have teams that are just like on a different level, like the USA, South Korea, and Australia were this year, it becomes more of a challenge, I think, from the outside looking in at least, to achieve that sort of goal. And it's really more of a stair step kind of approach from the early to mid to late rounds, depending on the teams that are left.
Basically, everything in your power as a pooler, at least conceptually, you want to be linear because everyone else expects it to be linear. But like, if you take a look at what actually fuels difficulty scaling, it's really getting like people in the tournament to get like a certain amount of score and like have a certain amount of difficulty. And if those people that are left in the tournament are so good, so much above everyone else, like you have to like give it way more like of a difficulty step when in the next phase, basically.
I have a
Yeah.
lot more to say. I don't know if Chev, you want to say stuff here.
Go for it. I can go last. It's all good.
Sure. So with regards to scaling, I think this is more of a personal opinion. I don't really enforce it on the whole pooling team or whatever. But I think a lot of people don't want to hear this. However, I think giving room for the best players in the world to actually be able to shine and have those moments is a really important thing. Not for just the players or the teams or the competition part of it, but also just for everyone watching. Quite frankly, it's a lot more entertaining and memorable, to use grand finals as an example, to like name one FC that was there, because there were so few. It's insane. It's memorable. I still think of Sayo FCing Rubik's Cube out of absolutely nowhere.
And that wasn't even an FC.
Yeah,
that
it
was just the closest thing
900K,
to an
but it's
FC.
just
Close enough,
really
right?
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
But it's
was
still
such an
that
insane,
memorable. Yeah.
memorable performance for everyone watching, for us as pullers, just thinking like, wow, that's actually a possible thing to do. That's insane. But also, for obviously for the players and teams themselves, I think it's really cool. And so at the cost of that definitely comes pools scaling a little too hard for some places. But I think it's really important for those players to have the space to do that, because if the pools are too easy for how good the top end is right now, then quite frankly, it's a lot less interesting. I think a lot of people might not really give that much that enough thought. But if you're playing grand finals and there are like 16 FCs or in a match, are any of them memorable? Not really, right? I don't know. There's been some times like in the past and stuff, especially when like Vexer was playing, when there was a lot more people on the high end that were doing those things, and I think in hindsight, looking it back, I think it's a lot less interesting than, wow, this one guy, not you, but like this one player.
Yeah, I got
did
one
this,
guy.
this insane thing, and it's memorable, and you have these crazy moments like the burning star and stuff, and I think it's really important to make the event memorable. So we don't necessarily balance around that. However, I think it's important for those people to have a space to if they're truly the best players in the world, they should have the space to show it in the hardest pool of the tournament, right? So I think it's important. However, we don't, like I said, we don't really bounce around that. I think it's definitely more on the lower end that we try to aim for. I think as like a general guideline, it's like these 3 teams that play in grand finals, or the 6 teams that play in finals or whatever. Everyone should be able to put all 4 players that get like 300, 400k minimum on every map. To me, that's being able to play the map. That's good enough. It gives a lot of space to pop off performances like 600k, 700k. Those are really cool, and also like extra pop off performances, which is really cool. And no one's really like, no one's eating dirt. Like they're all doing okay. I think it's fine. Like no one's getting a B rank or a C rank or whatever. So, with scaling for the top end, I think that's personally, I actually really like the way it ended from many different perspectives. I will also say, just to go back on this before I forget, to go back on like pooling infrastructure and stuff and the things that we did right. Again, go back to 2021 and 2022 where me and Mordred were kind of just given the reins of things and are like, figure it out. I'm someone that can kind of contribute in every single area of OWC pooling and stuff, just from the experience that I have. It doesn't mean that I want to do all those things, but that will just lead to burnout. There are like 16 or 17 different things that I can do personally. I'm one person on the pooling team, and I don't necessarily want to do all those. I want to focus on like 3 that I enjoy doing and I think I'm good at. So having a good like core for the pooling team and being able to expand on it and try to like delegate a lot of the work that a lot of people could do just as good, if not better, is really important, right? So hit sounders, I don't need to do them. We get other people to do them. Timing stuff. Fiery is here, wants to help. Great. There's a lot of selection. I don't really play the game too much outside of OWC. I don't have maps to put in OWC. I give all of that away to Chiv and Dada, and you guys have your people that you brought on for just selection. And so just being able to delegate a lot of these things, I think, is a huge thing that we did right, and that I think we're continuing to do, because I think all 3 of us specifically, I think we all have like full trust in each other to do what we do best, I think, and that allows us to really like stop looking at other areas that we don't really need to put more of our time into the areas that we should be contributing to. So I think that's a very important thing that we did right this year.
Yeah, just a couple things, because most things have already been said. On the topic of difficulty scope, I think that overall feelings is that we'll definitely dial it back down for next year, or at least kind of keep it similar in the fact that some maps are definitely too hard for the pool. It's something that we recognize, and with anything, like any type of risk you take, it's natural to have some backlash and some errors, and sometimes this is going to be complete. Like last year we had Burning Star, which is crazy difficult, and it did provide some great moments, but this year the maps that were super hard pretty much just didn't get played, which was kind of sad. But we'll be keeping it in mind, and this is just all part of the map pooling process, Definitely good to keep an open mind, especially keeping, positive relationships with both players and mappers alike. I think going way further back, we were talking earlier about how we felt about the internal team dynamic, and one of the things that I really focus on is that making sure that people don't feel like OWC is like you're working or anything. It's supposed to be fun, it's supposed to be a good time. So it should feel like just a great friend group of some sort. This year, a lot of the team, we would just be spending random time in VC, just playing League or playing Core Keeper, which we didn't finish, which I was really sad about, but hopefully we'll get to it, because I really want to finish that. We got to go back, but it's a process that I hope people have a lot of fun with, and it shows because pretty much every single person on the team. Of course, there's one person that people already know of that wasn't happy about things, but everyone else on the team pretty much returns for the 3rd year in a row now, and it's really awesome to see that people are just this motivated, this locked in, and we want to make sure everyone has a lot of fun. We want to make sure players have fun, viewers have fun, map poolers and staff have fun, and mappers have fun as well. So it should be something that everyone should cherish and not kind of be negative about. But yeah,
that's really important to me too.
This one doesn't really have a good segue. So the last topic that we have doesn't really have a good segue. So I guess last sort of call for anything about things that went right or wrong this year, or any of the like playtesting stuff, selection team stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Do you want to say anything though?
No.
All right.
Nope. Okay. So let's do. We have like 15 minutes before we hit our 90-minute target. So We're gonna end on time today.
Awesome.
Rare
Um,
occasion.
Rare occasion. How are custom mappers chosen? So there's a couple of different things that go into that tournament by tournament. There's, and I guess you could pose this question for playtesters as well, right? But what does a good application look like? Do you need to have rank maps? Do you need to be actively doing tournament customs instead? Should you be able to hit sound, right? There is a hit sounding team on OWC. Does that mean you just don't need to be able to hit sound, or is that still a plus, right? And I think a lot of mappers are interested to see like what is a good application, how are people chosen, and why are some people chosen over others, which is kind of hard to give in general, but we can try.
Yeah, we can try. So a lot of mappers actually DM me a lot asking like how do I get into OWC or what I should do. So we kind of look for a couple of things. I provided like different like solutions, and I've also given examples. I'll give some examples actually for mappers that did make it in based on this. So the most obvious one, let's say the grounded veteran who has made maps for multiple 20 customs. When you think of these guys, you think of, let's say, Captain One. You think of Lucent. These guys have been in the game for so long, they pretty much always get accepted because the quality is always there. They know exactly what to look for. So you have those types of mappers. You have your mappers who are built from the ground up in tournament mapping. So this year we had mappers like AJ Mosca, and I would also say Local Hero, two mappers who you see often in 5WC and Resurrection Cup and Corsace. These guys have been non-stop custom mapping for a good amount of time, and it's another way to just really secure good positions and or spot. And the third one is going to be, kind of rank mappers that show a lot of potential for tournament mapping. So a good one that we had last year and we're supposed to have this year, but was burned out, was Squirrel Pascals, who's a very good example of somebody that's super strong at mapping. Other examples we can talk about. Trying to think of a couple more. Going down the list right now mentally. Funjin is a good one. Hasn't really made any tournament maps before OWC, but clearly was way past the quality we expected for a quality level we could expect. James Jan 3 was another mapper who we accepted that purely only made rank maps before. So pretty much you can either go making super high quality rank maps or making tournament customs. Are both two really sound ways. The third one is really one-off. You have Arliz or you have these crazy unranked mappers that just have had notorious like name value. Blixie's was supposed to map this year, who doesn't really have an like significant rank maps or tournament experience, but off the sheer amount of value from just mapping quality, we take in some mappers as well. But yeah, I think both those two main ways are something that mappers should look for. And if you are looking for custom mapping for tournaments, there's always applications for other stuff like Corsace, Perennial, SSOT, BWC, and even smaller community tournaments, which you can find, through OSU Tournament Hub, or no shilling, but Pooling for, which is a map pooling
shilling,
Discord
no
you can
shilling.
find
No shilling,
more
no
positions
shilling.
for. So
No
yeah,
skilling,
both
but
those,
immediately shows.
yeah, those are
Yo, guys,
completely
buy
good
banners.
options. Yeah, I really hope that we can get, on one hand, we had a record. Maybe I can't say record breaking, but we had a crazy amount of mappers that applied this year. It was like
Record,
200,
yes, by far.
270, 280, which is insane. And the fact is that we're trying to like kind of keep the number of customs consistent or not too overbearing, and yet take in so many more mappers is what we're really trying to solve for next year, which is why we're looking at stuff like more collabs specifically to get more mappers in as well. But I hope that more people can keep applying and we can make OWC map pooling something even crazier next year.
I think we took in 90-ish mappers for 75 maps. We took in more initially, but some of them didn't really work out, or people were too busy and whatnot. So out of almost 300, it's starting to get to a point. There's definitely like a clear evolution that I think we noticed this year, where before it was, oh, this good mapper applied, let's go, take him in. However, now there are too many of them. the demand is like a little too high, so we definitely have to spend a bit of time like pick and choosing. So with regards to one of the things you said about like what a good application looks like, I think I can just shoot that down for a second, because I think we're changing the application for next year. But for the most part, it's like your experience speaks way more than the stuff that you might put down in an application, or if you can hit sound or not. A lot of what we take in is people that just at least have some kind of vouch from someone on the team, right? It's a really good experience. We're just like, hey, I really like working with this mapper. Let's invite him again. Let's see what he does. And similarly, I think it's important that I think if you're kind of known to be problematic or not available and stuff like that, I think that's also part of it too. Like no matter what you put down, it's like, oh yeah, we know this guy might just not show up for 3 months. We're not going to risk that. Sorry.
That's like-
And it's also one more thing to mention too. That I think it very heavily depends on, to answer this from a perspective of, like, if someone's asking the question about how I get chosen as a mapper in OWC, what I would tell you is that it really depends what you map. There are a lot of mapping styles and skill sets and stuff that are, quite frankly, pretty damn hard to compete in. You can get in for other things, but if you're known for doing those maps, for example, like I don't know if you're like an aspiring alt mapper and you have to get into this event that, let's see, Pedal,
Looks as good as
Flake,
Moth.
Delis, Mirage, Aishiru, like it's hard to get in. You have to stand against those people, like you have to stand out similarly to them if they also want to map alt. So just to give that as an example, like if you're mapping something that's a very like contested, I guess, like type of map for mappers, it's pretty hard to get in. However, we have taken, for some of the skill sets that are less common or a lot of the skill sets that are a lot more like niche, I suppose. Like if you just want to make something crazy and like a gimmick map and whatnot, I think like that is a lot rarer to find mappers for. So you're a lot more likely to get in for that. So
Yeah, I think just basically put your name out there. That's the overarching basically the overarching tip. If you want to get in, is like get familiar with the whole idea of tourney customs and like customing for tournaments. Do a good job in community tournaments. If you're in a contested field, really put in the work and like make sure you take in criticism from other people and like perfect your craft. If you want to just get into map like something that is a little bit more in demand with a lower supply, then just like get some examples of you doing that for other community tournaments or maybe like in a rank map or something like that. And really just your application matters basically zero. Your body of work is basically what dictates our taking in of you or not.
To me,
at the end of the day, like everyone here is here because they're passionate and they want to make something cool. If you are able to have, if you can demonstrate that, if you have experience of just doing something out of passion, doing something cool because you want to, I think that speaks a lot. So a lot of people that I'm thinking of someone right now. Maybe Chiv knows because I think you invited them, but I don't remember who it was. But like if you're someone that has a lower level of experience or less or no ranked maps, but you still put in the time with a lot of other projects and stuff, and you have the experience that like speaks for itself, and you have a lot of people saying they had a great experience working with you, then like we will take that. That's way more valuable than like, oh yeah, I made 20 tournament customs for like this and that, and it's like, I think that's extremely valuable to have like I guess a good reputation. That's what I would say.
Yeah, for sure. The map you're talking about, I've always talked about. It's Jolium, and he was a person who literally pretty much only made tournament speed maps, and we thought that he was a good fit. And although his map did require some help, it still worked out, and it was really awesome because I was happy we could shout out somebody that has been in the 5K 5-digit scene for such a long time and has
Some of
been
the
contributing.
qualifiers mappers too, right?
Yeah, Arushi is somebody who's made so many tournament maps over the years. over this year specifically. Mila as well. Mr. OMDB himself has also made so many tournament maps. And these two guys were crazy. Wispy, maybe not necessarily Wispy because he actually doesn't make that many tournament maps, but he was an original tournament player. So it's really awesome to have that. But yeah, it's really awesome. Of course, we did ask a couple mappers. It's not like Arla's applied, but I think next year we're gonna be asking a couple cool mappers that don't necessarily aren't even aware of the application process in general usually because it's just one random news post on the website and then a tweet from Aza. So a lot of people just don't even find out that you can apply.
I think it's
for
from the
it.
actual game Twitter now. It's not for me anymore.
Oh, finally.
Or
see,
both,
that's
I think. I don't know.
But yeah, I'm gonna be looking towards talking to some cooler mappers. It was awesome that we could have Arliz and Fanjin is another person who I didn't apply both years actually. We asked them directly to help out, and they made some of the most memorable maps for sure. So we'll look towards that as well.
All right. I think that just about wraps it up. Any final questions, Aaron? Any final thoughts, Map Pool team?
My kind of ending question, I guess, is just obviously with it being a year out and the process is only kind of just getting underway, but like anything you can sort of hint at or share with us that we should be looking forward to in 2025.
Oh, like
I think nothing other than original started, right?
yeah,
Yes.
but it's already gonna be crazy. Like it's gonna two things. It's gonna definitely in terms of like being interesting, definitely be far above 2024. I think, especially like Mango's been hyping it up. But we're gonna have to put a lot of work because 2024 was already super exciting for a lot of people. So we're gonna have to do some generational things for sure. I'm excited though.
I mean, to talk about something that's not originals real quick. We've said this a couple times already, how we kind of have the same process, but it's been refined a lot. I think we still find ways to improve how we pool and how we interact with, how these projects come to light. And like we still have a lot of areas that we can improve on and are actively improving on. And I think that's very noticeable in the actual like experience with the pools, where I think, quite unanimously, I think year by year, the pools just get better and better for everyone. So I think you can look forward to that continuing for the most part. I think we still identified a lot of sections that we could improve on. I'm not going to talk about them on a podcast, but I mean, there's a lot of sections that or individual experiences that could have been a lot better if we had things done differently. So if you already enjoy the pools now, I can basically just guarantee you that they're just going to get better. So if if you enjoy them, cool. Look forward to it. It's going to be great. But yeah, for originals, I can also say a similar thing about that, where, quite honestly, the Pepe is pretty satisfied with how we handle originals for the World Cups, and is definitely allowing us to do some more, out there things, and allowing us to do more. So already, because I'm basically almost done with the lineup of originals next year already.
Yes.
At least in planning, but yeah, it's you'll like it. You'll like it. You'll like it a lot.
Yeah.
We'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Anyway, like just a couple of questions from chat, I guess. How are you guys going to advertise LGA considering the player base in the tournament? While fine wasn't obviously able to borrow for usual registrations. I think LGA this year, a lot of the stuff we had to do was like essentially poking people like 3 days in advance. It was very like kind of rushed, but I think we can definitely have something a little bit more flushed out next year that will hopefully be a little bit more indicative of overall like staff pushed projects. Are they gonna have a Grand's TV somewhere again? The graphics and sound, probably.
Oh yeah, I mean, we're actually still finding new ways to do that. I think there's some of them that have been identified already, but I talk about this a little bit. But it's nice to leave crumbs for people interested to find and to get involved in, or people to have that moment that is like, whoa, the stinger was the grand finals TB the whole time. The applause sound is the grand finals tiebreaker the whole time. Like, I think it's nice to have those moments and to give people the experience with OWC, and it's something that I try to look for more ways to do. So, yeah, I'd love to have more. I mean, this year with Camellia, hold on, I have this somewhere. With Camellia, I'll shut this out. But if you bought his tournament compilation album, which was released literally before OWC started, there's a QR code in there that has Operation Zenith Fall, and in the actual thing itself, this is not going to show off well on a cam, but we are all here. This was released 3 months ago. There are hints and there are breadcrumbs like that where if you're attentive enough, you can kind of figure some stuff out. So I think
a physical CD from Camellia.
I think that's
Yeah.
really cool.
That's yeah.
So this whole time you could have known if you looked enough. So this is one way of I think it's nice to give like teasers and stuff like that. Maybe like an ARG or something would be cool. But anyway, yeah.
All right, very cool. I think that's just about everything. I will be on the lookout for breadcrumbs this coming year. Try and figure out as if I don't already have access to the internals.
Right.
But maybe other people should be on the lookout for breadcrumbs, right? That'll be it though for us. That's everything. Thank you very much to Azer, Shiv, and Dada for coming on. It was a pleasure talking about OWC map pooling history, originals, pooling team this year, all that good stuff with you guys. We'll probably have you back on at some point next year, maybe, if we do this again. But thank you very much for coming on, and thank everyone else for watching. We'll see you guys. Actually, I don't know if we have an episode planned yet for next week. So this may be the last episode for probably a couple of weeks here, with Christmas week coming up, number one, and number two, with having, I think, done a lot of the episodes that we wanted to do for the 2024 iteration of the World Cup. So thank you everyone for watching. Thanks again to the pooling team for coming on, and we'll see you all, I think, in the new year.
Thank you.